Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and I'm taking care of business. Joining me today is Jennifer Hunt, who is Chief Intelligence Officer for the Real Estate Wealth Lab and founder of Ventures with Adventures. Thanks for joining us today, Jennifer.
As always, a pleasure. Thank you so much, Mario.
Let's talk about real estate and investment, and let's look at Calgary in particular. Is Calgary a good place to invest in residential real estate right now?
100% yes. It absolutely is. So these are some of my favorite topics: real estate, investing in real estate, and Alberta. So, and definitely Calgary is in a great place, and we can talk more about why I think that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. And what are some of the main reasons that investing in Calgary's real estate market these days actually makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I look at, I've created what's called the real estate cycle formula. And in that, I look at about 24 or so indicators. Some of them are leading indicators and some of them are lagging indicators. And ultimately, those help us identify, where a particular market is in its cycle. And Calgary is in a place where we want to be considering where and it shows and forecasts where a market is going. So I've just completed an analysis of Calgary based on January data, and Calgary's in a great place. So let's talk about why. So we look at economic and leading indicators, GDP, so gross domestic product. What's the economic activity? And Calgary is doing exceptionally well. Now, we all know that the government imposed restrictions due to the COVID-19 illness, definitely placed some challenges on the economy. And Calgary was worse, well, Alberta, I should say, was hit a little bit worse than other provinces.
Yeah.
However, its growth trajectory, so it's got a little bit further to go to make up the difference. However, the growth trajectory is very good for this year. It's up to, I think it's now 6.6% for 2022. So it's definitely making up the lost growth. But what's really cool is looking into 2026. So the farther out it goes, Calgary's projections are higher than the majority of the country, leading the economic activity. And that is important because economic activity generates increase in rental prices, as well as property prices about 2 years down the road. So that's great for looking forward. We also want to look at jobs, which is another leading indicator that impacts our rents in our property markets down the road. And jobs are down, so they're not where they need to be. Still recovering from the pandemic, from restrictions that were imposed due to the pandemic. However, it is making positive gains. And again, when compared to always want to compare a city to its province and then the province nationally, and it is recovering quite well. And jobs data, quite frankly, is just tricky. There's about 4 key components that need to go in to examine what's going on in the jobs market. And now there's even more with underutilization, participation rates, are people employed in the right skill sets and things like that, or getting the number of hours that they want. So while jobs are down and they haven't recovered to where we need them to be, I'm confident that it's going in the right direction. But more importantly, these are the 3 key leading indicators, and they don't always work exactly in tandem. And what's really cool about Calgary, and I'm very interested in it, is that the population, it's actually attracting a lot of people. People are moving to Calgary. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and including, I've come up with a new theory, Mario. And I'm starting to see it. I've really applied it in the US because the Real Estate Wealth Lab covers market analysis in both Canada and the US. And I started seeing some really interesting trends about population. You've heard things like headlines of the Great Migration in the US and the Great Canadian Migration, people moving to places that are more affordable. And that is certainly the case for Calgary. So its population, it used to be, upwards of 13% in terms of net migration, but it's still up. So it's gone down in recent years, but it's still up way above the provincial and national averages, somewhere at 5.5% growth.
Mhm.
which during the pandemic restrictions and the closed borders and the lack of immigration is very, very, very high. And that's excellent. And so what happens is when people come in, all right, that generates some economic activity, jobs will come. Individuals are working from home. That's another component. So they're actually moving to Calgary and their job might be somewhere else. So the jobs numbers aren't going up, but the population is. So that's another huge major trend in favor of Calgary's real estate market. And then there's another component. I'm going to layer this in. This is what I've been watching. Is that Alberta's position, the government's position on the COVID-19 restrictions is a lot more open. And I just saw a tweet actually by the premier saying that we're definitely going into opening up restrictions, opening up capacity, removing passport mandates. Now, whatever you think about that, the right or wrong, what happens is economically speaking, by opening up those restrictions, that's good. And secondly, there is a vast number of individuals who are moving, and I'm calling it the refuge, the great refuge. And individuals are moving to states or to provinces that have fewer restrictions imposed on them. So for example, Florida, their governor has, just said, no thanks, we're not imposing any restrictions. And their population is massive. They're attracting sort of a refuge, if you will. And Alberta is in the same position, and Calgary as well. So that's fantastic and poising the real estate market for very good upward trends. Then I can get into some stats on the rents and homes as well.
Well, that I just wanted to chat about the demand. Obviously, the demand is unbelievable, right? Last year was a record year for MLS sales in Calgary. And I looked at the Calgary Real Estate Board stats just today, and it is, for the month and a half into the new year, it's way above, like I think it was like 60% or plus.
Yeah, it's huge.
Above last year's sales, and last year was a record year. So the demand is just huge right now, right?
Yes. And the demand, it's upwards like 70% or something like that over year. I mean, so you're right. It's way up there in terms of increasing home sales. And you're right, it's driven certainly a little bit by price and that affordability concept, but by demand. And there's, I'll talk on two main points of that. And one is that immigrants to Canada, typically when they arrive, our traditional sort of immigration client, if you will, typically already has a down payment. About 70% of immigrants have a down payment when they arrive in Canada, and that same 70% take about 3 years before they buy and decide where to settle and to buy a home. So what we saw in 2020 and 2021 in some of the demand was actually a lag in the immigration that we saw at record highs from 2017 and 2018. We also saw a record high of immigration in 2019. So therefore, based on that theory, it is a working theory. I'm working on a white paper to support it. But so far, things are showing that this is a real possibility that this trend impacts the demand, which of course raises the prices. So we would expect that given 2019 immigration was way up there, plus the affordability factor of Calgary, that there'll be, and it's just an attractive place for a lot of immigrants to come and settle, is that we will see another year of very, very strong demand, which of course pushes the prices up. Then we're going to flip to the supply side, and Canada is actually the lowest G7 country. Which is remarkable in terms of supply for people. So the ratio of the number of homes for sale compared to population is the lowest amongst the G7.
Yeah, exactly.
Now there's various reports, in terms of the actual number, what is that, millions or whatever have you, in terms of having to build. But let's just put it this way. The majority of housing supply was built across Canada. This is really across Canada. The majority was built in the 1970s. And we really haven't seen much since. Then you layer in inflation, you layer in some of the supply chain issues, you layer in all these other things, and we're just not going to get the supply built fast enough. So because of this massive, like massive discrepancy in terms of supply, that pushes, and we've got demand increasing, and many people are seeing the signs of inflation coming, and they know that housing is one of the, well, housing real estate is one of the most beneficial investments one can make that outpaces inflation.
Yeah.
So you're getting extra demand there, and then since that supply isn't there, so we're going to see this housing price continue at least for this year. And I would what I'm also thinking is, other than a small softening in 2023, 2024, it will be an upward pressure on prices for the next decade.
Yeah, and when you look at those prices, that's the one thing that is really stunning about Calgary is prices compared to some of the major centers in Canada, or, particularly Toronto and Vancouver, obviously. But, and even the rate of price growth over, say, the last 5 years or so, like, have been skyrocketing in Toronto, Vancouver, right? Where Calgary's has had kind of like a steady
Yeah.
pace. So there's a lot of room, obviously, to grow there. The other thing to keep in mind too is housing affordability. RBC does its quarterly reports all the time. Excuse me, quarterly reports all the time on the affordability issues. And Calgary, again, compared to Toronto, Vancouver, Ottawa, Montreal, is the most affordable major center in Canada. Edmonton is the only one that's has better affordability in Calgary. So that's got those factors about the prices and where they're at is a great investment opportunity for people right now, right?
100%, yes. And exactly, Calgary's had a very sort of, well, I mean, it experienced a very significant softening, if you will, a contraction in the real estate market after sort of 2016
Yeah.
oil crash and whatnot. But what I love about Calgary in particular is that they put in a 5-year, sorry, I should be more clear. The city implemented, I think this was in 2017 that they started really speaking to it, a very robust plan, a 5-year plan to diversify its economy. And when politicians speak, one's got to kind of, okay, pay attention, is it actually occurring? And it is. They've really done an incredible job of diversifying the economy so that Calgary is less reliant on oil, and it's got different industries that it's targeting. And we're definitely seeing the benefits of that program, of that concept implemented, which also attracts even more individuals for all kinds of different industries.
Yeah.
So but yeah, so back to the home prices, you're right, like sort of around 450,000 as a a range, let's call it under 500,000,
Yeah.
compared to Vancouver, which I think the benchmark is 1.2 now.
Yeah.
And what we're also seeing in Calgary, which is very cool to see, because they had too much condo supply for quite some time, but it has now finally been absorbed, and we're actually seeing a fairly significant, the demand for single family homes is still there, but we're seeing a very large increase. I think it's actually, I'm just looking at my stats, I think it's up, yeah, condo apartment transactions up 94% year over year.
Yeah, that's a
So
time.
it is. And I forecasted this in December 2020. Yep. December 2020, I forecasted that condos in September 2021 in all parts of the country, yes, you got to do your diligence and whatnot, but for the most part in large cities like Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, etc., that they were going to meet an extraordinary demand. And the reason for that is because the initial restrictions of the pandemic, individuals moved out of the cities, there was some nerves and whatnot, but that created major opportunity. condos went on sale a little bit, and the Malenzies and the first-time home buyers recognize a deal. They're smart, and they know that cities are going to come back. And so there's been a huge, just right on schedule. We saw in September through the rest of fall, winter 2021, and Calgary showed it, 94% year over year increase. That demand is there. So yeah, there's a lot going on in Calgary, that's for sure.
All right, super. Thanks, Jennifer, for joining us again today.
Thank you so much for having me. And these, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, are indeed buy signals. Now do your diligence. And if you want more market updates, always come check us out at the Real Estate Wealth Lab.
All right, super. That was Jennifer Hunt, Chief Intelligence Officer of the Real Estate Wealth Lab and founder of Ventures with Adventures. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.